Okay, good morning. Welcome again to a tiny topic in a huge amount of time that we have to address this morning. So, the future of education. I mean, those of you who have been here for the last couple of days will have recognised that there's probably nothing been more important that's been talked about than the skills that we need to address this huge opportunity, challenge, change that we're undergoing here. And I think one of the things we wanted to talk about today was to really get a bit of a sense as to whether the education system we have today is going to deliver all those skills that we want. And I think most of us would recognise that it probably has to undergo some change, but I think we also recognise that the technologies we're talking about in this week also have the opportunity to significantly enhance that system. And so I'm delighted to have a wonderful panel here today with me who are going to discuss this subject, hopefully all with a relatively short address just to give you a bit of a context of where they are. And then we will have a discussion, an open discussion, maybe have a chance to have a few questions from the audience as well. So I will probably introduce as I ask each one of them to go up. And I'm going to ask my friend here on the right, Professor Anthony Seldon, to kick us off with some thoughts. And I'm not sure whether it's true, but I'm sure it should be that your book is probably for sale downstairs in the bookshop afterwards if people want to learn more about some of the thoughts that Anthony's had. Anthony, welcome to stay here, or you can go up and take the podium if you will, whichever you prefer.
So thank you, Phil, very much indeed. And as you mentioned the book, all the profits go to charity. So I'm unashamed, and they go to the Joe Cox Foundation, murdered by a fascist. So all the money from talks and books always go to charity. Phil, I mean, here we are. Can I just ask the audience here, how many of you think that our schools and universities are preparing our young people well or very well for the future? Hands up. Hands up who thinks they... Yeah, well,
a teacher.
A teacher, yes. And who thinks they could be doing a better job? Okay, so that's the end of the session then. And we can all go. It's now... So let me just say 3 introductory comments. As somebody who has for 20 years run 2 of our most academic schools and did not do enough when I was there to broaden out our young people, and now I run Britain's leading independent university and medical schools. So, 3 things. First of all, I don't think we should use the word problem, Phil. I think the P word should be banned from this stage. This is a massive, massive, massive opportunity. And I think we should be talking broader than AI into the whole 4.0 revolution, including the whole complex of 12 interlocking technologies that make up 4.0. We have never seen such an opportunity for the 4 billion young people in this planet today of school or college age, to give them untold opportunities for an education at all, Phil, but also for a depth and a breadth of education that will truly develop all their talents. We don't have an education system. Understand that, please, everybody. We have an examination system. Damien Hines should be called the examination secretary, and they should, the world, I have yet to meet a single education secretary anywhere in the world who knows what the word education means. And what we don't lead out, because that's what the word means, our 8 different intelligences, what we don't lead out inside when the children are at school will remain dormant forever. So this is the first great point challenge, that this is untold opportunities to change, to pivot Britain and the world from exam secretaries, exam departments to truly education departments. Second is that the 21st century is very different. This is the biggest thing. His Excellency talked there about global warming. This is so much bigger than global warming. We are going to solve global warming. We need not just 1, we need 100 Greta Thunbergs talking about 4.0 and how, if we do not act properly, this will be in the interests of the few and not the many. These untold riches of this technology, we have to use them in the interests of many. And it's one reason it's so much more difficult than global warming is we know what the deal is on global warming. It is getting hotter. The sea, though not this month, the sea is rising. We can see it. We know what to do about it. This is so much subtler and more puzzling to know what the problems are and how to turn them into the opportunities. So that's the second. And the third is that I don't think we have a great deal of time about this. Yeah. You know, and very wise people like Martin Rees, the former Astronomer Royal, or Stephen Hawking say this is the biggest challenge that we face. It's the biggest opportunity and it's the biggest challenge. We can do it, but it does need incredibly well-wired, well-connected, deep, thoughtful, passionate people, like everyone in this audience here today, to get right behind how we can make this a revolution for the many, for tomorrow's jobs. Our children will, most of them will be alive in the 22nd century. Our teachers will be dead long before. We need to be doing a much better job. And just finally on this, we've set up with Priya here and Rose, the Institute for the Ethics of AI in Education. We want you all to belong to that. It's a global movement to make certain that the 4.0 revolution is going to be in the interests of everybody with proper ethics and principles, and not just the few, those governments and the big tech companies who, with eye-wateringly moving statements about how they care deeply for everybody, we know that that isn't their ultimate motivation. Not that they're bad, we need to nudge them in the right directions. Thank you very much. 5 minutes.
So I think you'll all agree, not only a highly articulate and thought-provoking, but an inspirational start to the challenge, the opportunity that we have over the next few years. What I wanted to do now is just to counterpoint that a little bit with some folks who are kind of getting on with this in a slightly different way. And I've got a couple of colleagues who have come from a Chinese company called iFlyTek, who are, and we have Fei, who's going to come up on stage and join us and give a little bit of a demonstration, and then Wushu, who's going to join us on the panel. We'll talk a little bit about what they're doing in iFlyTek. And this is companies addressing at the scale one has to address in China, which is pretty immense. Hundreds of thousands of schools, millions of citizens, huge class sizes, huge urbanization, huge rural communities to deal with as well. And when I asked them earlier on, I was chatting and saying, obviously there's a lot of startup companies around here. And I said, how many people have you got in the company? He said, 11,000. I went, oh, okay, that's really taking some scale there. So I'm going to ask Fei if you'd like to come up and do your quick demonstration, and Wushu will then carry on and explain a bit more of the company. Okay.
女士们、先生们，大家上午好！很荣幸有机会在美丽的伦敦跟各位相聚于此。今天我们讨论的主题是教育。我曾经在中国学过10年的英文，后来我们研发了这样的系统。那么，希望用这样的系统能够让大家理解我所说的中文。 那么，科大讯飞呢是中国人工智能技术的领导者。我们主要做人工智能3个领域方面的技术。第一个，计算机在语音方面的应用，包括语音识别，也就是把我所讲的语音转成文字的技术。那么现在我们在中文和英文2个领域都是做到全球顶尖的水平。 当然也包括语音合成，包括机器翻译。第二个方面，我们做的是计算机视觉，包括人脸识别以及图片识别这样的技术。那么第3个方面，我们做的是认知智能的技术，从常识推理到文字的知识图谱的技术。希望这个 转写成的英文能够帮助大家的理解。下面我还有一个简单的 video 来展示我们在语音方面的技术。好，请切换一下屏幕。
Okay, is it?
Is it a bird? Yes, it is. It's a bird.
Yeah, good job. Crystal and Sunny.
It is a bird.
I think that's the wrong one.
It's a
So
bird.
yeah, that's
Wow,
VIP Kids. I think.
great job. Ada and Cleo.
It's a bird. Yes, it is a bird.
Good job. Very, very good. Is it
I think
a pencil?
It is a pencil. It
Is
yes,
it a pencil?
yes, it is a pencil. Yes,
Yeah. Yes, it is.
pencil.
yeah. Actually, I think yeah.
Speaker a little later, so it's just a preview of what Guan is going to say. So Guan is actually from a company called Say ABC, who are also based in China, in Beijing, and they're very much engaged in kind of engagement with teachers and how they can teach English to kids. So we'll take that and remember that when Guan gets up and speaks in a moment about his particular aspects.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to carry on with.
Yeah, I just spent a couple of minutes to talk about iFlatTech. Before that, Fei just had a great demonstration about how they can speak Chinese into English. And then this is the technology that we can dictate English in real time as well. So after the conference, everybody, if you are taking a meeting minutes, you just can scan, ask for some meeting minutes from us, okay? So first of all, I'll give you a brief demo about the digital avatar that we can use lip-sync technology with our TTS. So next stage, yeah? Here. Where? Ah, that's it. Okay.
No, seems to be going the wrong way.
I don't know, yeah.
Just don't click so many times, just click once. Okay, hold on, so don't click anything.
大家好，我是全。
Yeah, maybe it's not on the screen.
Yeah, just 1 second.
It's always fatal trying to do a demo real time on stage, isn't it?
No, it's okay, yeah.
Just 1 second.
大家好，我是全球首个人工智能多语种虚拟主播小晴。今から日本語での報道を始めます。현재는 한국어로 보도하겠습니다. Now I will broadcast for you in English. 欢迎大家关注两会报道。
So this is actually the real application that we're using for the digital avatar to provide for multilingual services to the national broadcasters. And iFlatTech is mainly specialized in cognitive intelligence and artificial intelligence. We are founded in 1999, and we are one of the 4 national open platforms in China. Actually, we have 11,000 employees, yeah, with average age of 26 to 27. So we are a very young company. And in 2017, MIT Technology Review gave us top 50 smartest company in the world, and iFlatTech has ranked number 6 out of the 50, and we are very flattered by the recognition of MIT Technology Review. From the day one we established our business and our company, our vision is to use artificial intelligence to change the world, make a better place by enhancing efficiency and lower the barriers between human and machines. So we're not only providing TTS voice technology, but also some image recognition and machine translation, OCR technology as well. So we are a technology-driven company. We have won a lot of international awards. Take an example of 2018, we have won 12 championships regarding to different fields of AI. For example, SQUAD 2.0 or Chime Challenge, etc. So that's the slide that I want to share with you. It's pretty important for us to talk about AI strategy in China from iFLTech's view. And we have our strategy summarized as platform plus industry. So the platform is one of the 4 national open platforms, as I mentioned before. Currently, we have over 920,000 startup companies are using our core technologies integrated with their apps by providing SDK from us, SDK and Open API from us. So every day we have over 4.5 billion times daily interactions that will just make machine learning faster than ever, and then can iterate faster than human beings to learn in a process. And also we are using our core technologies into different verticals, which we think the key verticals are very important, such as education and healthcare, fintech, automotive industries, and also consumer electronics. So we also can provide consumer electronics devices for the translation. For example, in education, we have supported 30 provinces with over 12,000 schools, and top 70% of the top 100 schools are using our platform and solutions. And in healthcare, we are the first robots to pass the national examination license, national medical license examination around the world. In a smart service, we have over 80% of the market share to provide the speech navigation for the banks, free AVR system. We also have our consumer electronics that can support Chinese to 51 languages. So I give you a quick demo about this. 今天很高兴可以和大家一起探讨人工智能。
Today I am very happy. I can discuss artificial intelligence with you.
Yeah, actually, I'm just speaking what it is. And to the nature of education, we think we have created over 110,000 developers are in our ecosystem by using our API to provide educational applications in China with over 200 partners. And we are really strong in those 3 areas, which are auto grading system, teaching assistant, and personalized learning system. Why is that? Because now in China, we are very good at OCR plus NLP plus big data. And nowadays in China, if you are taking a Chinese examination or English examination, all can be scanned by the engine and all auto-marked by the engine. And then it shows the consistency of the English essay is less than 5 points by the comparison of human and the machine. And for teaching assistant as well, our core concept is that for teachers to provide different types of equipment to measure the individuals and also the class by the data collections and data analysis. So in the third part, most importantly, we are thinking that's to put every individual academic records to the container, which by using the AI technology, give you adaptive learning and individual different homeworks. Because we have very good knowledge map of each subject and then coordinate every individual's knowledge graph of each student correlated with the knowledge map and then give them the personalized learning method materials. So as you can see from the big data statistics from our side, we think we have already achieved the outcome of the time spent for homework reduced 30% and also reduce the anxiety about 20% by having different homeworks, because they have more time to do extra activities outside of the class, and they can play they can reduce 15 minutes by the homework time. So finally, we have provided our solutions to over 25,000 schools and also nearly 100 million students are using our things. So I can discuss more in a panel session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So thank you. Well, I was going to ask now, it's Priya, who's clearly got, I mean, Priya, I'm sure many of you know already, but, you know, serial entrepreneur, you know, from very different industries she's been involved in, but, you know, very much focused in this kind of world of education through technology now. To just give a little bit of context, and obviously we're a little short on time, so just keep it a little sharp and maybe a...
No problem. I'll try and keep this short. So, education, right? It feels like we always talk about formal education, but actually education is from cradle to grave, right? We should be thinking about formal education. We should be thinking about lifelong education. My biggest concern is that education has so far, especially for us and, you know, potentially if we don't change things for some years to come, it feels like it's something that is inflicted on us. It feels like something that we must do. It feels like something that we are spoon-feeding our children with. But actually education we know should be top tier. We know it should be accessible to all. We also know that it can be and should be joyous to all. So about 7 years ago, we just started on a journey and started to think about what are the main problems in education. And having visited some of the best schools in the country, some of the most challenged schools in the country, they're all very different. Every school is different, every learner is different, every teacher is different. But there are some real problems on the front line of education that we have to tackle. Right, we know that one-size-fits-all delivery of education in the classroom, you know, you all sat through your classroom days, it doesn't work, right? And it's not the most effective. It will work for some, but teachers are constantly saying that they want to differentiate for every single child, and that's what they signed up to do. Teachers don't do their jobs for the money, just in case that's a revelation for any of you, right? They're in one of the most rewarding professions in the world. They're trying to differentiate for every student, but that is nearly impossible to do, whether you are a top independent school with 15 kids in front of you, the average secondary school in the state system with 30, or if you're in parts of Africa, etc., where I've been to schools and there are 65 in a classroom. You can't do it. And then what teachers are trying to do every single day is personalise and increase agency in learning. And agency is a really, really important concept. Why? Because education should not be spoon-fed to our children. We talk about automation a lot. We're talking about the skills of the future. We're talking about what our young people need. They need what I like to coin as learning agility, the ability to learn how to learn, right? So that as the world throws new things to them, as the pace of technology changes things, they need to be able to upskill themselves. And teachers are trying to do this. Yes. But it may be news to some of you that teachers spend 60% of their time on admin. 60% of their time is spent micro-marking, micro-assessing, trying to gather all those workbooks, figure out what's going on in a test. Then they turn into data analysts. You know, what is the misconception in this class? Who doesn't understand what? And they're trying to make those interventions. So what we need to do is recognise that the most important person in the classroom is the child, but the most powerful person in the classroom is the teacher, and we need to untie their hands. So at Century, we spent the last few years developing technology. We merged neuroscientific theory with artificial intelligence and learning science. And essentially, I'm not going to show you a demo of it, but you can go on the website, have a look at it. There are hundreds of schools in the country. We just signed Eton, for example. We've got academies. We've just signed 2 entire countries. It learns how the brain learns. Why do you come at education from that standpoint? Because the current technology that exists in the classroom, in most classrooms, is called the learning management system. It's that technology where you send homework back and forth. I mean, how many of you are parents? Can you put your hands up? Right. Keep your hands up. Add your hands. Put your hands up if you're godparents. You've got nieces. Exact. Right. It's pretty much all of you. You'll have seen this sort of system. And actually, the key word in learning management system is the word management. Because when you look at education, the majority of what you see is about management. It's about the management of resources, with the management of the number of the children, with the management of a building. And actually what we need to do is build technology that's actually truly about education, which is how that individual is able to learn. And education is often actually, if you think about it, it's about opportunity and choice. It's about trying to provide every single child, when they leave formal education, with opportunity and choice. So we've built this technology. You can absolutely have a look at it. It's called Century Tech, and it learns how the brain learns. And essentially, it will learn every single one of your needs. It tracks your behaviors through your movements. It figures out that if you're struggling in physics, it's actually because you're struggling in maths, and it gives you that content, and it does all that sort of stuff. But what is the point of it? By being able to differentiate for every student at that level, it removes that one-size-fits-all delivery of education. But with all that data that it is collecting, it's able to analyze. You've all been to CogX maybe for a couple of days, or you're experts in this field. You know what big data can do. It can predictively forecast. It can look at patterns and correlations in data. It crunches that data in a nanosecond and provides analysis to the teacher. So the idea here is to untie the teacher's hands and tell the teacher, right now in this classroom, this is a child where a timely targeted intervention is necessary. And that's basically what we're trying to do. But I think there is a bigger conversation here. And I want to end on this. You all put your hands up. You're either parents, you've got nieces and nephews. You can build the technology, and the technology exists. There is technology out there. There's lots of technology being built by some innovative startups, by social enterprises like ourselves. And it's being deployed in countries across the world. One of my biggest fears is that the last country to adopt this technology will be this one, because the amount of inertia in the sector and the type of risk-averse sort of nature of people in the sector that we have. And it is really, really difficult when you've got legacy technology in a sector. So I urge you to all do one thing at the end of this panel, and that is either get your phones out and get on social media and talk about changing education now. I hate panels called the future of education because it's not a future issue. And what happens when you call panels the future of education, you talk about the future of education, is we all sit there in this false sense of security that we need to do something later. This is something that we need to do now. So you either get on your social media and you say, we need to do something about education now, and you can hashtag CogX and everything else, or you write to your head teachers. You write to them and you say, actually, we need to start looking at using innovative technologies and tools to try and help solve some of our schools and our children's greatest problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So again, a very clear and a clear articulation of the challenge and, of course, of the necessity for us to do something now. I completely agree. This is about, this is the burning platform we're all on at the moment. So a couple more folks just to give you a little bit of a sense of where they're coming from. Guan, I know we've already seen your video, but we maybe will just get a little bit of a sense of what you're doing to engage in China. We saw there it was very much about how you actually handled engagement with kids, particularly in this case teaching them English. But maybe you could just give us a quick background on yourself.
Thank you, Phil. Hi, everyone. So now you've seen my product. I'll just use a few minutes to cover what we do, the current challenges that we face and where we are. So I'm Guan, and I'm from VIP Kid. We're an education technology company headquartered in Beijing. And in a nutshell, what we do is that we connect teachers from primarily North American and UK with our students, kids that are between 4 to 12 years old on our platform, on our global classroom to have these English learning sessions. So essentially what we're doing today is solving the access problem, right? Not long ago in our lifetime, all these learnings were actually happening in the physical classroom. But today, because of the technology, we have managed to connect over 700,000 students from China with over 60,000 teachers, right, over the past 4 years that we have been acting. And I think that's tremendous. But I would say we're still in its infancy in terms of what technology can do. And more specifically, you saw the demo. There's a lot of interactions happening between these kids and the teacher. There's peer learning. The kids are learning from each other. And there's also the interactions between the teacher and the kids. It's massive data that is being generated in these classes, right? And we talked about, moving away from this one-size-fit-all model. So if we could really harvest all the data that is happening in these interactions, we could really create individualized learning paths for each student. Because all these kids, they come from different backgrounds. Some of them have studied a little bit English before, some of them have not. And some of them learn visually, while others learn through other ways. And how do we cater for all these needs, right? And we see technology and AI as the main driving force behind it, right? All these kids are on individual speech and video channels. So we can actually separate them and really understand, by opening up that black box and really understand what's going on in these conversations. And another thing is how we actually make learning fun, right? No matter how well you've designed your curriculum, how sound the curriculum plan is, you need to make it fun for these kids, right? They are very, very young learners. So we work a lot with engagements, and computer vision, augmented reality plays a big role in there. Right now, what you've seen from that short video, it still looks a little bit like a video conferencing system, right? But that's not really how we imagine the future of learning on the internet will be. With augmented reality, for example, we can create a learning experience where teacher could be actually teaching from anywhere, you know? It could look like the teacher is teaching from Grand Canyon or in a national park, in a forest, in this really, really immersive environment and making learning really, really engaging for the kids. It's not really just about the bling blings and the gamification of getting some coins and stars or whatever. It's more about shaping that learning path that's really engaging, motivating for the kids. Now, lastly, what are the challenges that we face? If I would just pick two, number one is that although we have connected over 700,000 students on our platform, I think we can do much more than that. There are students and kids in rural areas in China and around the world who I think deserve much better education. And I see technology as the only way to reach out to the kids out there. So I think that's number one. Number two is that I think there are too little talents that are going into solving this problem with us, right? Especially if we are talking about talents in AI and machine learning, emerging technologies. A lot of top talents going to build flying cars and whatnot. But I think we have really an important problem to solve. And my final word is to invite everyone to join us to solve this very meaningful problem.
Thank you, Graham. And last but not least, we have we've got Rose Lucken, who's the professor of learner-centered design at UCL. So, Rose, maybe just a little perspective before we get into the panel discussion of, learning-centric is clearly where this should be about the learner itself and how the learner actually engages with the education system. Maybe you just give us a few thoughts and then we'll talk about
Absolutely. Yes, it's always hard going last because everybody has already said most of the things that need to be said. And so you've seen the kind of technology that can be used in education and you've heard about it and you've had powerful arguments from Anthony. So I'm going to give you a slightly different narrative just to get you thinking. It's a narrative of 3 acts. It is the future of education. It should probably be called the future of humanity and the future of the world because that's what it is. Act 1 is history. Act 1 is the history of science and technology. It's what took man to the moon, and it's what created artificial intelligence. It created artificial intelligence in our image, but in a very limited human image, in a very particular sort of way. And therefore, we have systems that are intelligent in a very particular sort of way. And it's extremely important to remember that. Act 2 is what's playing out now. And it's very uncomfortable because I don't see education leading the way. We have a perfect storm of data, computing power, and smart algorithms. And to use a contemporary analogy, certain organizations snort up the data, snort up the power, snort up the algorithms, and spew out behavior manipulation. They make money. They snort in the money. They snort in the fame. They snort in the power. And they spew out fear. Robots are going to steal your jobs. They make more money. They spew out more behavior manipulation, more ignorance. How many ordinary people know how much they are being manipulated by artificial intelligence at the moment? A very small percent. We are breeding generations of people who are ignorant about the way their behavior is being changed. Dystopian or what? Yes, I'm frightened. I've been accused of scaremongering. And the reason I do is because I'm frightened. Education is not being taken seriously enough. As Priya said, it's not a problem for the future. It's here. It's now. So what is Act 3? Act 3 is up to you. Is it going to be like King Lear, where we go mad? Is it going to be like Romeo and Juliet, where we all have to take our own lives because we can't see a way out of the problem that we've got ourselves into? Or can we do something special? Could it be all's well that ends well? Or even something like a tragedy, like Macbeth, that has a good ending for the people who really matter? I believe it can. I believe we can get it right if we focus on human intelligence, if we focus on what it matters to be human. What is emotional intelligence? What is social intelligence? Why does it matter that we care about each other? And what does this have to do with education? Well, education is the core part of society that helps us to nurture people in a community that cares about them, where they trust each other, where they're not interested in just their own profits. They're not interested in just winning the game according to the current rules. They're interested in what can be called the infinite game, in bringing together a community of people to ensure that humanity survives and that humanity thrives. Yes, if we get it right, we can have the kind of intelligence infrastructure that will power the best education system in the world, that will mean that every child anywhere can have a high-quality education. But it will only happen if we all act now. It's not just the people on the stage. It's all of you. Don't just write to your teacher. Write to your MP. I go to China and I see amazing vision. I see a vision of an education system that is driven by challenge-based learning, by project-based learning, by getting in touch with our emotions. Where else in the world do you see politicians and governments making education their central call to action? There are a few places, but not many, and sadly, not here. We have to stop arguing about whether it should be skills or knowledge. Oh, is it badges or tests? No, it's intelligence. It's our own human intelligence. We have to use AI to build an intelligence infrastructure. That's data, that's computing power, and that's algorithms informed by what we know about how people learn, about how people teach. And we will only do that through trusted partnerships between technology companies, governments, and educators, all working together. We will only do that if we make that transparent to people, if we don't manipulate them without them knowing they are being manipulated. And that means everybody has to understand a certain amount about artificial intelligence. It's important. Everybody in this room should be doing something to try and make that a reality. Otherwise, I do fear for the future of humanity. And the fact that education is not central at this conference, is not central to our government, is not central to many, many, many companies working in the AI space, is evidence that worries me. So my final passing shot has to be Shakespearean, but perhaps a slight riff on Shakespeare from the lovely Kit Marlowe. I love you loads. I love you because I'm human. I love you because I can. And I love you because it's important that we all love each other.
Thank you very much. So, with that highly erudite articulation of the challenge and some of the opportunities we have, I think we have to kind of say here, I mean, we've got an audience here which is enthusiastically supporting some of the premises that have been laid down. We've got technologies that have been demonstrated. We've got academics who have spent time both in school and in universities trying to solve this problem. Why are we not solving it? What's the problem? I mean, why? It's so obvious. We've got kids who are missing the system. They don't fit in the bell curve.
Because we're not the people in charge.
Well, there you go. So is it ultimately policymakers that's the issue? Anthony, what's your perspective?
Well, thank you. It's the right question, Phil, given that we all in this room here all agree, and given that we are the most intelligent people in the world, why is it not happening, obviously? And it's not happening because because of the accountability system. So if you are running a school, whether in China or in Brazil or in London, you are looking at how am I going to be judged?
Yep.
And you are judged not on the basis of your development of the human intelligence, the multiple intelligences. And by the way, I'm not happy with this idea that these are the top 100 schools. China gets a lot right, but it also is cruel to children and to teachers to say this is the top school. You're just the top at exams. You're not the top, the best schools. It may be that the best schools are those miles out. We have to get away from that notion that exams are all important. They're important, but they're not all important. So, Phil, the simple answer is change the accountability systems the world over, and we will start changing schools so that they develop human beings and they start, which will help the mental health crisis, because at the moment, schools are not interested in the development of each child. They're not interested in a child. What a silly idea. They're interested in what they can do. They're interested in a, and I know because I've run schools, they're interested in the child giving the right answer in the right time at the right way. So if we change the accountability system to a much more holistic model, and if we have a much greater sense of the world and how it's going to change and how wonderful it could be if schools developed young people more holistically. The future is happening. Rose mentioned Uruguay. I mean, in this country, we are miles off. Our Department for Education, our Department for Examinations, as we have renamed it, simply doesn't know what is happening. The government thinks that it's a good idea to come out of an international organization that's allowed this country to come from nowhere to the very top because we want a little Britain. I mean, it's difficult when we have this distraction to really think about what matters. Nothing is more important in government than education, and in education, nothing is more important than the development of the whole child for the world we're going to face. And can I just ask everyone here to say that my university is starting Britain's, possibly the world's, first 4.0 undergraduate degree in history and postgraduate degree in cybersecurity, and I'm trying through my university to start the first primary school, perhaps in Tech City, that is using 4.0 so we can understand better the frontiers about what can the machines do best, what can human beings do best to develop the rounded humanity in each and every child, because every child, wherever they are in the world, and whatever their exam intelligence, is uniquely and equally important in the world we're about to face.
Very, very, very powerfully put, and I agree. And I think the challenge really is that it's a huge challenge. This is change the system. I mean, how do we change the system? We need to do things very practically, I think, in Bea.
So there are a couple of countries out there that are procuring these sorts of technologies because they want children to spend more time collaborating, focusing on different skill sets, focused on well-being. His Excellency, who spoke a little bit earlier, something certainly that the UAE has done. They've even got a road called the Happiness Road now in the UAE, and they're doing all these sorts of things, right? But the problem is, exactly as Anthony says, there is a measuring system. So if you think of OECD and PISA, right? And so look at what they measure. They measure a country by very few metrics, right? And most of that's sort of literacy and numeracy. So if the entire OECD system is measuring your country by those few metrics, they're not looking at metacognition. They're not looking at well-being. You are measured on those literacy and numeracy. What happens? As a government, does any government in the world want to be the bottom of PISA?
Yeah, clearly not.
Doesn't look good, right? So what do? You then measure your entire state school system by those metrics because you need to be high on those metrics. So you say to your schools, yeah, all of these things matter, But actually, we want you to focus on literacy and numeracy. And they are really core basic skills. I'm not saying they're not, but then that's all they look at. And then what happens is that head teachers, principals, are forced to look at those specific measures. And so what happens, as Anthony says, it sort of trickles down. And Rose has often said on stage, you treasure what you measure, right? Which is a really good, really succinct way of putting it. So the problem is that if we don't start to measure the right things, it trickles through the system. And so head teachers are under pressure. Now, there are head teachers out there, and there are many of them who look at that and think, but I care about the child. I know hundreds of them. And then I'm mortified on social media to find that one by one, they're all dropping off out of stress and their own well-being issues because they are trying to deliver an amazing, rich, wholesome curriculum to all of the 939 children in that secondary school. That's the average number in England. But yet, they also have to deliver all these other measures. So there is a huge issue in terms of trickling down. So unless PISA, OECD, Andreas Schleicher, who's a good man, but unless he actually manages to change those metrics, you are never going to be able to change that problem. And the second thing, I touched on it earlier, but is change management. Change management, as you know, in so many different sectors, is really, really difficult. Changing attitudes. Imagine walking into a school and being a bold head teacher and saying, I'm going to do this, even though this is not what I'm measured by, I know it's right. And then imagine having a teacher in front of you who's taught for 20 years, who just says, well, I don't want to do that. And you've got that problem in terms of inertia. So those are the two issues that really need to be worked on, is the accountability measures to help those leaders in schools make those bold decisions, and then being able to help them with change management. And that is all part of leadership, but often we don't invest in our head teachers, we don't invest in our teachers, we don't give them the continuing professional development that they so deserve to be able to cope with these particular issues.
But again, I think a great support for me, and I think Anthony's written about this in the past, that the administration and all the other things teachers have to deal with clearly then self-selects the teachers in many cases. You end up not getting the people you want to do this. And, there couldn't be anything more crucial than having the best teachers in front of the best kids.
I need to add a point to that. Sorry, it's a big counter-point because it's so important. So that touches on something really important. There are a couple of countries in the world that we know of, like Germany, Canada, where a teacher is considered, in terms of profile, as high as an engineer, right? That's something you can fix today. You can fix it today, right? In this country, we treat teachers like they're in that job because they couldn't do something else. Yeah. These people are looking after our children, right? So the one thing that we need to do, apart from all of this, is raise the profile of that profession. It is absolutely terrifying. It's awful that we treat teachers that way. They're not doing it for the money. They're trying to look after our kids and their well-being. So that's the first thing that you can do when you leave, is say, thanks, teacher, for doing such a great job. We appreciate it.
Guan, do you have a comment on that from a Chinese perspective?
I just want to briefly comment on measuring outcomes. And obviously I know quite little about the British education system, but it sounds like we have some commonalities on key challenges, between China and Britain. And it is measuring how you actually measure outcome of kids in school. And it's interesting because assessment and tests is supposed to tell us about students' competencies and capabilities, but a lot of times they fail. And I think a lot of schools that I've looked at in China have that problem, that in the entire education system is measuring on test results that is not really reflecting on capabilities and competencies of kids. I had the fortune to grow up first in China and then in Sweden, and it was a very vast difference. When I then went to Sweden and studied in elementary school, and the shift was, there were very little tests and quizzes, and everything was very much focused on hands-on and really application on what you're doing to really show that you have actually understood a concept. And I think that's very powerful. And I can see a lot of opportunities where technology can help us to measure in much richer dimension, and to truly design a system for how we can measure competencies and capabilities of kids for real.
I mean, I think the difference is, when I talked to you guys beforehand, the differences I saw when I talked about it was, first of all, when you talk to schools and teachers particularly, they say, just got too much stuff. You know, I'm getting told to change all the time. I don't know where to go. And then obviously, you know, as you said there, you've got, you know, all sorts of capabilities that are being provided to people, and that varies enormously across countries. And certainly over here, you know, a lot of teachers are just scared of technology, and the idea that you bring in some kind of AI-based system to help them do it, you know, would be a complete anathema to them. I mean, is there a sense that, you know, Rose, I mean, have you seen examples where this is working well? I mean, because we can all articulate the problems, and we are articulating very clearly and with passion, and I think people are buying into them. But, you know, changing the system isn't an easy thing to do. You know, you have to do it from the ground up or the top down or both. But, you know, where is it really starting to happen?
Well, you know, that's really interesting. I think Anthony mentioned that, you know, I often talk about Uruguay.
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting country. Now, not particularly in terms of AI, but in terms of designing the right kind of education system, where systems such as those you've heard about from Priya and you've seen demonstrated can really fly. And it's a system that's based on trust. It's a system that's based on a community who wants the best for everybody, not just for themselves. When we look at what drives this treasuring what we measure, it's all individual performance. It's all individual performance. Why? Why? And how on earth do we expect that to change the system? I don't think changing the system is complicated. I think it's difficult, but I don't think it's complicated. We don't trust our teachers. We don't trust our individuals. And that is hugely problematic for society. And it doesn't build communities of trust. The only way we will prosper is through building these communities of trust. And that means that we help nurture people. We nurture our teachers. We nurture our young people. We nurture people whose jobs are changing and make them feel like they do still have value. It's about remembering we're human. So yes, I do see systems that work well. You can point to systems that work well. And there are amazing technologies that can support those systems. But before we bring those in, we have to work out, what do we value? What do we want? What does success look like for our education system? And it isn't what we have now.
So two final points, Phil, and I agree absolutely here. Two final points based on my experience of having been in schools all my life. It is that the human is often ignored, and we need in this revolution to remind ourselves profoundly about what human relationships are all about the family. Schools don't teach about the family. The family, economists will say, is, as psychologists will say now, in the last 10 years, they've suddenly discovered the family as core for psychological health and economic health. Love, relationships, we need these. We need dogs in schools, animals. Schools need to be harvesting their own crops and some of their own energy, because this reminds children about what is real, the cycle of growth and life and death, so that these machines, these new technologies, will help ground us more in our humanity. That's my first point. And the second is that every single person in this room, and we've all five of us, and you fellow have said this, everybody here has to come out from here and make that difference, because it isn't certain that we are going to win this. The subtitle of the Fourth Education Revolution book is, will AI, will 4.0 infantilize or liberate humanity to give us benefits that we've never known in our lives on Earth before? It can, but it will only happen genuinely and truthfully if each and every one of us gets right behind this and puts not just understanding the technology and how enriching it can be in the interests of the many, but also the fact that our agency matters. Priya and Rose talked about agency. It's all about helping to develop each and every child as a unique human being and valuing each and every teacher. And we need to do that. And we start in our own lives by valuing our own children, our own godchildren and nephews and nieces and friends. That human valuing is going to make all the difference, whether we win or lose this. We'll win global warming. I don't know if we're going to win this. We must. We must.
So we've probably got a minute or two just to have a question or so from the audience. If anybody's got one or a solution, to be honest, would be great as well. So if you've got, someone here.
Yeah, thank you so much for your existence and thanks everybody here. I just want to say that I'm so touched by this conference and what's happening here. I just want to say when we talk about changing the system, it's not difficult, it's not complicated. Just think about if this is what we have achieved through fear and competition-based education system, imagine what's waiting us if we change this to love and collaboration and seeing us all as one. The new generation is so epic. I work with kids, they're so filled up with compassion and they don't know how to use technology. And if we just show them how to love and respect each other and see us as one, we don't need to deal with them because those kids are going to be the politicians and next teachers and our next generation. That's all we need to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It wasn't actually a question, but there you go. Have you got a quick question?
Do you think there's potentially it'd be good to get other classmates to help teach each other? If a classmate understood something, they could teach other people in the class. That would add to collaboration and social.
And are you a teacher? So the question was, should students be teaching each other more? I mean, maybe I was just a rubbish teacher, but I always found they learnt much more from each other than from any lesson I ever taught in 30 years. But yeah, it's wonderful, that liberating. The brave teacher allows the students to teach each other and to truly share. That's when classrooms become alive.
Yeah. And that happens in life, it happens in business to best people.
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, well, join.
Join.
Come up afterwards.
Sign up.
Yeah, sign up. We're going to have a sign up.
There's one here, and then we've probably got maybe one quick one, yep.
The panel is fascinating and amazing. You're talking about monitoring efficiency, test results, and politics. You're talking about monitoring efficiency, test results, and politics, but there's been one thing.
Thank you, Anthony.
There's been one thing missing today. Nobody's talking about how do you make education more fun? How do you put stuff in front of kids that kids care about or they like? And there's so much more opportunities now to put modern stuff quickly into schools digitally. There's nothing about how do you make education more fun, and I'd love to hear it.
I'd put an 18-year-old in charge of education. I mean, why not?
Why not?
I think you need to move away from a rote learning system. So while it's a factory model of education, which is what we built for the Industrial Revolution, and while we continue with the factory model of education, you're sitting them down at a desk saying, revise these timetables, do this, do that. There's no freedom, right? And what I love about education now is this idea of freedom. They don't really coincide when you think about formal education, whether it's here, whether it's K-12, whether it's in China, right? So allowing that classroom, whatever that classroom will look like in the future, because I believe it will look different, and I have intentions to make it look different, but imagine giving the teacher freedom. Imagine giving the teacher freedom to think about, how do I teach this concept, this knowledge-based concept, let's say, right, that's essential, but allowing it to be relevant, right? How do you do that? So creating fun in the classroom is not just about, so we have tech companies that talk about games. You've got to be very careful with that, right? So games can be really useful for practice, and we're going back to sort of the AI topic here, but gamification, while it's powerful, you have to retain the intrinsic value in learning and not make learning have an extrinsic value for students. So it's about freedom, trust of teachers. I'm being told off. This is not what you do in the classroom. So no, I'm really kidding.
Peer learning.
Peer-to-peer learning, and just allowing them to have a bit more time. There we go.
So listen, we'll maybe take one more question. Anthony has to disappear because he's got another point. Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, well, one more question and then we'll finish up.
Okay, I'm actually a teacher.
Hey, we love our teachers.
And a researcher. And I'm really interested in the potential for AI. However, as Anthony has very eloquently described, within our current system of assessment and very narrow curriculum, I am slightly concerned that it could be used to create a very two-tier education system, in that we have children plugged into AI systems that are hyper-differentiated and hyper-personalized, but on a very narrow set of skills. And I'm just interested in how the panel see within, I mean, it would be great if we could suddenly walk out and change our national curriculum, but maybe we can't. So how can we balance those things moving forward?
That's really interesting, and I completely understand, I hope. Oh, I empathise. I may not completely understand. And it's a dystopian picture I've painted in the past. The utopian version is what our current independent schools do. We have the best independent schools in the world. Andreas Schleicher says, hey, your independent sector in the UK is fantastic. You know, they are never going to be plugged into an AI system for the whole time. AI will be used very judiciously, very wisely, and very effectively, and then there'll be lots and lots of human interaction, because that's the gold standard. We all know, Priya and I have talked about, there'll be more sport, more drama, you know, more human contact if we get it right. But the problem is, exactly as you suggest, if we get it wrong and we're driven by costs, then of course, oh, teachers are ever so expensive. And hey, we've got this all singing, all dancing system. And you could maybe just have some people to look after the children. And then we could plug them into the system and they could get all the things the current curriculum says that they need, and they could pass the exams. And I worry about that a lot. I worry about a two-tier system where the privileged get a great education and the less privileged get my horrible dystopian, your horrible dystopian view, where it's all about the technology. And we lose what's really important, which is that human interaction. If we get AI right, there'll be more human interaction, because it's about humanity when all's said and done. And we know, you know, I have children, I have grandchildren. I've taught from little ones to some of the brightest children in the world, from adults with special needs to 14-year-olds struggling to learn some basic information. You know, I know that curiosity-led learning is one of the most powerful things we can do. I know the most powerful interactions is the one that you have as humans, and the ones where peers interact with each other and learn from each other and learn together. Learn about trusting each other, learn about understanding each other, as well as about understanding physics or math or history, whatever it is. So we cannot have that dystopian future. But it's us, it's everyone in this room who can stop that happening by saying, no, this isn't good enough. This is not what we want for our children. It's not somebody else's responsibility all the time. It's all of our responsibilities. But you are right to be raising that as a concern, because we need to be aware of it.
And thank you. And that's why important organisations like Anthony mentioned, you know, Centre for Ethics in AI and Education, and more broadly, has been talked about widely here. Super important that we keep this dialogue going. But also, I think the call out you've heard from the panel here overall is, don't walk out of this system and go, oh, that was quite interesting, it wasn't education, shouldn't be different. Go and do something, get involved, go into your school, go and talk to a teacher, go and give her a hug at the front here as a teacher.
Join our institute.
Just join and care about this subject, because it's so important. And if we get it right, it will be an amazing future. And I'm sure we can. We just need to put these great minds and your great minds together with all the technologies available, and we can do incredible things. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been great. Thank you. And thank you to the panel, please.